Happy Friday, everybody. We're going to do chapter 2 today, which is called The Worst Bramblesmas Ever. The norm. First, you need to know about them. Nowadays, thank the goddess, they are nothing but a bad memory, something to scare the little ones with at night. But back when your grandparents were young, rabbits lived in constant fear of their strange riders, of the screeching of metal in the night, and the echoing of their terrifying war horns, the gorm. Nobody knows exactly how they came to exist, only that they were first seen in a little warren called Sandywell, up in northern Enderby, where the Red River meets the sea. A meek little tribe of rabbits lived there, grey-furred sable bunnies that liked fishing, sailing and building boats. They never caused any trouble, and nobody paid them much attention, until, one day, everything changed. Some say there was something in the river that got into their veins. Some say they tunnelled too far down and came across something cursed and poisonous. Others say it was the work of witches. Whatever the reason, they stopped being the Sandywell Greys overnight and turned into something else. Something evil and unnatural. First the warren changed, just a little at first, until eventually great spikes of jutting metal burst out of it, sticking up into the air like poisoned porcupine quills, and the land around became blackened and scorched. The waters of the Red River turned black and noxious as they ran past. Animals that lived in the woods and waters either died or became warped and ruined. Folks started calling the warren Splinter Home and stayed well away. But that didn't help them. Next, the old Sandywell rabbits reappeared, except now you wouldn't have recognised them. They were clad head to foot in iron armour, that metal that rabbits find impossible to work with, and poisonous to the goddess herself. The Sandywell rabbits had not only shaped and moulded it, they had bonded with it somehow. It seemed as though the metal had fused and pierced their very skin. It ran through their veins and bled into their eyes, turning them blank and rusty red. The rabbits used the metal to bend and shape the creatures around them as well. The dumb giant rats that all rabbits use as beasts of burden, and the black crows of the nearby woods. They changed them into shrieking flocks of rusted metal harpies. When they rode out of Splinter Home, they came to devour and destroy, and they were called the Gorm by all who feared them. If they called at your warren, then that was the end of you. They would kill your chieftain and his sons. They would rip your warriors into shreds. Then they would carry half of you off to be changed into goddess knows what. The rest would spend their miserable lives making food and supplies to feed their new masters, never knowing when they too would be dragged away, wailing in the night. It was a dark time for all rabbit kind, is what I'm saying. It was in those days that Podkin One Ear lived. He wasn't a hero back then. He hadn't slain any giant rabbits or formed any robber bands, and he hadn't even begun to think about rescuing maidens. In fact, he was only a youngling, 8 summers old. Oh, and he still had both his ears. Podkin was the son of Lopkin, chieftain of the Munbury Warren, which meant that someday he himself would be chieftain, just like his father's father had been, and his father, all the way back to when the goddess first made the 12 tribes. For now, that all seemed a long way off. And that was the way he liked it. He had an older sister called Paz, who liked to boss him around as much as possible, and a young kitten of a brother called Pook, who didn't do much except chew things and ask for soup. You might think as a young rabbit that Podkin was already showing signs of heroism, great skill with a sword maybe, bravery, courage, wisdom, determination. You would be wrong. If anything, he was perhaps the laziest, most spoilt son of a chieftain in the whole 5 realms. At least he was, up until the start of this story. His father tried his best to prepare him for leadership with lessons in history, rabbit lore and soldiering, but Podkin took great delight in avoiding them all. Daydreaming and snoozing were the only things he practised, and, to be fair, he was very good at them. He was the despair of all his tutors, especially poor Melfrey, the weapon master, who resigned 3 times or more from the task of teaching Podkin. The young rabbit simply had no interest in doing what was expected of him. So it came to pass that on Bramblesmas Eve, much like this one, Podkin One Ear, although technically 2 ears at this point, was sitting upstairs in the wooden gallery that ran around the edge of Mumbury Longborough. He was lazily pushing around a toy wagon, munching on a stolen piece of cornbread and daydreaming about the midwinter rabbit who would be visiting that night, hopefully with a sack full of presents. Would he get the wooden soldiers he'd asked for, or the toy sword and shield? Or would it be the disappointment of a badly knitted woolen tunic like last year? "What are you doing up here, Pod?" His sister had tiptoed up the stairs and was now glaring at him. Podkin's little brother Pook was nestled in the crook of her arm, chewing away at a carrot. "Mother sent me to get you. They're about to have turnip soup and dance the bramble reel. You should be there, seeing as you're the next in line to be chief." Paz took it hard that she was never going to lead the Warren, even though she was the eldest. But it was tradition, fair or not, that the first son took over. Podkin yawned deliberately. The bramble reel, how exciting! He took Pook from her and tickled his tummy. He could hear all the festivities in the hall below and had absolutely no desire to join in with them. "Please stand aside so I can rush down the stairs and prance about like a prize pudding." "If you don't come down, you're going to be in trouble," said Paz. "Do you have any idea what it takes to be a chieftain? Nobody will want to follow a lord who spends all his time tickling his baby brother, playing with toys and hiding away in corners daydreaming." Podkin huffed and flicked his ears at his sister. "You're just jealous because you think you would make a better chieftain than me." "Well, I would, wouldn't I? Anyone can see that." Paz started ticking off a list on her fingers. "I'm the eldest. I do what father and mother tell me. I go to all my lessons instead of hiding in the meadow and picking daisies like a rat-brained fairy flump. If there was any justice, girls would be allowed to become a chief instead of rabbits like you, who don't deserve it." Podkin was about to leap on Paz and pull her ears when the Warren horn began to sound. The 3 young rabbits rushed to the edge of the gallery and looked down onto the hall. Soldiers were grabbing spears and shields, children were being herded into the corners, and their father, Chief Lopkin, was striding towards the borough entrance, drawing his sword, his great silver broadsword that everyone thought was magical. "Midwinter Wabbit! Midwinter Wabbit!" Pook shouted, trying to wiggle free. "It's not the Midwinter Rabbit, Pook," said Podkin, the argument with Paz forgotten. "It looks like trouble. And trouble doesn't leave presents outside your burrow at night." Frightened murmurs were drifting up from the crowd below. "A rider! A lone rider coming!" And then, "A rider wearing armour! Iron armour!" And finally, "It's the Gorm! The Gorm are here!" This last shout caused mass panic. Podkin could see his father shouting, but his voice was swallowed up by the hubbub. The Warren was terrified, losing its head. This was the time it really needed its chieftain, somebody to lead them all. Podkin watched Lopkin breathe deep, then bellow in his great commanding voice, "Silence!" And we'll read the rest tomorrow. I wonder what's going to happen. See if you can remember at home. Maybe you could tell your mums and dads, brothers and sisters what happens next, or what do you think's going to happen. See you tomorrow.